Good day, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Medtech Business Academy podcast, sponsored by your Medtech experts. My name is Skender Daerti, and I'm very proud to have you on today. I am pleased to be joined by our panel of Barbara Strain, Colleen Patterson, Scott Alexander, and Mike Spurduti. Welcome, everybody. Today is a very special episode. This is our 100th. I didn't know if it was gonna be like Pee Wee Herman, noises were gonna happen. If there was gonna be like banners or anything.
Do you want us to do the Pee Wee Herman thing?
We at least get like that. Can we get like one of those things going? Or we do something every time you say 100.
Barbara's got it.
There we go.
Love it. But today is the 100th episode of the Medtech Experts podcast. We are very, very fortunate. When we all started this, we were just wee little innocent ones, so young, so innocent, so full of desire.
So much less gray hair.
Yes. So much less gray hair.
I was like this already. So.
And here we are over the past roughly 4 years. We have put 100 episodes together of just chock full of knowledge and insights and various points of entertainment throughout and stories. So we're really excited to just share with you kind of a reflection back on where we've been, why we think this is still very relevant to today's needs, and where the opportunities can be in the future. The one thing, to provide some history, we started talking about this from a perspective of coming out of COVID in the what do I want to call it? In the Great Isolation, I think is what it's going to be called sometime in the future. But in the Great Isolation period, when nobody was talking and there was just a quandary around what is happening, what do we do? How do we move forward? That kind of became the impetus, and we started with webinars, and we transitioned to this podcast concept. But really, the idea was we have all these individuals, our hosts, our panel of hosts and experts on here, who touch so many different aspects of medtech at any given time. Everybody here has some sort of advisory practice or just provides advice and consultation and insights to people either on a free basis or on some sort of compensated basis. But you take that plus the aggregated experience and expertise from just years of tenure in this industry. And the thought was, as people are looking for guidance as to how do I traverse through this great isolation and looking for insight and guidance, we wanted to be that ray of light. Okay. And it's because these people, through their aggregated experience and through all of the different parties that we touch on a day in, week out, month in, month out basis, perspectives are different. And I know for myself, when I worked at a single med tech company, right, you oftentimes get lost in your own tree. You never see a forest, right? It is a tree. And the day's fires further put you into that tree. And Smokey the Bear wouldn't like that analogy. So just let's take that away later. But we all get the idea. And so now what we wanted to do with this podcast was take all the exposure that all of us had and the hundreds of companies that we speak with, interact with on a month-to-month basis, seeing all the various paradigms, seeing all the shifts, seeing everything happen. We really wanted to be that opportunity to kind of share that on a true microphone, on a pedestal, scream it. Hey, this is what we're seeing is working. This is what we're seeing isn't working. So for the masses that are caught up in seeing the bark, maybe they can get a glimpse of that forest a little bit. And that's really the beauty of what I think the Medtech Business Academy is. And so we want to reflect a little bit on the last 100 episodes, roughly 4 years of where we were to where we've come from, not just as an episode, but really as an industry, right? And then we'll spend a little bit of time talking about where we're going. So, get us started here. Mike, tell us about your experience on 100 episodes of the MBA podcast.
So if I go back 100 episodes and we are either in the throes of COVID or were we in the throes of it at that time? Like literally, were we shut down?
We were rounding the corner. The great isolation was becoming less of an isolation, and
The webinar had started though during the year of web. So for anybody who does not know, the podcast as we know it today actually started as a year of every month there were webinar episodes of Medtech as we know it does not exist anymore. The doors are shut. People are not answering their phones. We're in crisis mode, but business still has to run. Product still has to get to shelves. Sales still need to be made. What do we do now? And so we did the year of that. And then coming off of that, it was webinar fatigue was so real because everybody and their brother then, moved to webinars. And so then we started into podcasting, which, is now a totally unsaturated market where there's just a few options. And that happened, as to Skender's point of really turning the corner right around the idea of when things were going to open up, right around the time that the war in Ukraine started, actually.
Gotcha. So from my perspective, and we'll just talk relative to inside sales, that was a really funny time because prior to COVID, I was one of the loudest voices in the world, banging the drum that everybody should be using inside sales, that it was the single biggest opportunity for growth. And there, even back then, you would think that more companies would have implemented an inside sales solution, and many of them didn't. And so when COVID hit, the entire market became an inside sales organization overnight. Everybody started working from home. Everybody started making sales calls from home. And what ended up happening was the companies that were seeded into inside sales that have mastered or at least started down the process of mastering the discipline of inside sales crushed it. I mean, the companies that we were working with, just the timing was amazing. And, we just saw those companies really catapult much further than the ones that didn't. Then all of a sudden, everybody was clamoring for what do we do? Right now, we have to be an inside sales team. Our outside sales people are now having to use video technology and the telephone and digital marketing, which is the cornerstones of inside sales. And they had absolutely no experience doing it. And so you had a massive transition. A lot of customers were getting really sloppy and poorly done sales calls, which a lot of them still exist today. So back 100 episodes, it was pandemonium in inside sales. For the ones that hadn't done it, it was, we have to learn how to do it. We have to buy the technology. We have to look at CRMs. We have to look at buying lists, coordinating data. I mean, all things that, old Steve carrying the bag had no idea what the heck he was doing with tech. So 100 episodes was a completely different game than where we are today.
Yeah. Barbara, how about your perspective?
Well, from the provider perspective, there were various stages of we're not talking to anyone because we're so into how do we get all the stuff on our shelves that we actually can get our hands on? Where can we, get gloves and gowns and masks and things? And today people say, I wish I could only focus on gowns and gloves and masks. Now I'm focusing on everything. So we've run the full gamut. There's still the themes. And one of the things I think that we did well when we went to podcast is we'd capture what in the heck did we do for the last few weeks. Some of us went to conferences, some of us talked to different people. Some of us did a variety of different things. And so when we came together and shared all of our points of view, it really helped to open up eyes as to what providers and suppliers and inside sales, all those things were doing. So when we open up that provider world, is some of them didn't even entertain new product requests or entertain any appointments or anything. until at least perhaps the beginning of 2022 or later. So it was still a conundrum, especially for those suppliers who weren't involved in all the PPE conundrum. And they were sitting back preparing, as Mike kind of alluded to, of what do we do now? How do we prepare when, we see the window opening a little bit? And they were chomping at the bit, but who do I call? Who's accepting, invitations to look at things? So it was a very difficult time. And today we still have some of that, only because of finances and things that we'll get into, I'm sure, by the time we discuss everything.
Yeah, I mean, when you do a look back like this, you always say, "Oh man, that was such a crazy time," but it's still kind of crazy.
It's always crazy.
Different crazy. Yeah, right, Scott? What's your perspective?
I mean, kind of like Mike. When all this stuff happened, I went from being a moderately attractive man to Brad Pitt's dream. I don't know what I'm trying to like I'm so much, I don't know. Go with the analogy of like a much more handsome person than Brad Pitt. I don't know where that was going, but just
and much more relevant than Brad Pitt today, by the way.
Much more relevant. That's the phrase. Speaking of people that live or are from Missouri, do you know he's from Springfield, Missouri? Ran a 5
No, did not know that.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, kind of like you were saying, Mike, you were very vocal about the role of inside sales. I was very vocal on the role of marketing and the impact that it needs to have in the commercial model. And if we think back then, right, slightly before that, it was all communication went through the sales reps, right? And so it was the sales reps, and you were arming the sales reps, and that's what you were doing. And then when we started this podcast, your reps were stuck at home competing against Mike and his team, right? And so, what are you going to do from an educational standpoint? What are you going to do to generate leads? Like, we've never had to do that before in an industry. And so I think people were just trying to figure out how to do it. Now, that was really where it was. And, compared to where we are now, where people are still trying to figure out how the heck to do that. So, it was very, very different back then, to say the least.
So, Colleen, I don't know how you're going to top Brad Pitt, but help us understand your perspective.
I am not a normal guest on the main Medtech Business Academy podcast.
My mom is like, "Who's that voice? I've never heard."
I know. The voice from the past is like tickling the brain and the memory. So for myself, my specific background is in operational efficacy. It's in supply chain management. It's in, how do you do a lot with a little? And, the world as we knew it, as far as how operations and medtech interacted with healthcare, drastically turned on its head. Historically, we saw a lot of pushback about doing any sort of significant modernization. The healthcare delivery and the way that education was delivered to clinicians was archaic. Everything was really on that door-to-door sales. Everybody had to be in person. There, e-learning or, any sort of virtual classes were really big. That's just not the same quality. And I remember even, people would talk about going to school. I'm going to go to college. I'm going to do virtual classes and be like, oh. Whereas, we really saw a very significant paradigm shift for, what that development meant is I think we are now seeing so much more acceptance of virtual tools. I think that actual shift led the pathway into us having AI within healthcare. I don't think that AI would be as prevalent now without this real heavy push to virtual. I think that we've seen a lot of really interesting things happen regarding what the landscape looks like, what the future of healthcare as a career looks like as a result of what's happening. So for myself, though, I started out as the disembodied voice on the webinar series and then on the initial podcast, sitting there as a producer and kind of helping keep everything organized, which now, if anybody does not know, Steve he's our guy behind the scenes, and he does such a lovely job of making sure that we all look good and sound good and that the podcast goes out. And during those discussions, I remember sitting there in the background and really thinking that I didn't hear enough representation of the female story, of the women who got us to where we are today. And that a lot of, not to diminish the role of like nursing at all, because that's such a relevant and valuable profession, but it was really about, the leadership talks that we were having seemed to always be with men, and women were like the sidekick. And that just didn't sit right, because although I'm Skender's sidekick, I don't really, Skender and I do happen to work together. He is shaking his head no, because if anything, he gets to be my sidekick most of the time, where he's the color commentary. He's, he gets to go and do the rah dance. He's fun dad, and I'm the mom who, and yeah, 100%. He's the one looking good, holding down the bar at a conference, and I'm in the background getting things done. And I was like, if that's my story, how many
Colleen,
other...
I'm sorry to jump in. Looking good is relative here, right?
Wait a second.
I mean, no one looks better than you, Scott. Let's be honest.
Fantasy. Give me half a second.
Yeah.
Okay. Fair.
Skender's got a fresh dye job. Like it's looking A+. So, but like, if that is my story, I know that's other women's stories. And I kind of brought the idea to Skender of like, what would you think about this spinoff idea? Unfortunately, he tells me no very seldomly. And he was like, I love that idea. It's so great. And that has really led us to now 2 years of highlighting all of these wonderful women first initiatives and, founders and, engineers and supply chain professionals, and really being able to expand the lens of who and what we are. There was some really great legislation that happened in prior years about a focus on women's health. There's some not so great things that have happened this year, personal politics aside. The millions of dollars in grant funding for NIH about any sort of DEI, including the word women's initiatives, is a little bit scary. But, I think that it's important for us to continue to show up, to tell the stories, to really push the possibility of what innovation can be, and to help those that are in a position of saying, like, I've got an idea, but what now? I don't necessarily have the big bankroll. I'm going to have to be scrappy. What's out there? That's a story that I'm just so passionate about continuing to be able to tell.
Yeah, it's so awesome that you're highlighting the women of healthcare, because I think, my favorite comment about women's competency is back in the old days, there was two dancers called Fred Astaire and Ginger Rogers. And they used to refer to Fred Astaire as the world's greatest dancer. And I love the comment that Ginger Rogers made. She's like, he really is. And I do everything Fred does except backwards. Right?
In a skirt and heels.
Exactly. Yeah. So the talent that's out there and the talent that you've had on your podcast are extraordinary. So It's nice that you featured those executives.
Yeah. I think another plug for if you're not listening to women in medtech. So, I was on the provider side as well. And, at Mercy, one of the stats that we had is women make 70% of the healthcare decisions in a family, right?
Yep.
And so
for themselves, their children, and their spouse.
My wife makes me go to the doctor. So it is very true, right? It's probably the same for Mike, you and Skender too, right? So like the reality is it's a big deal from a decision-making standpoint. And I recall a buddy of mine who worked for a large medtech company, and he happens to be a man of color, and the only man of color in the he's of Indian descent, and he was the only Indian guy in this division on the marketing team for this very large medical device company. And they used to trot him out to meet all the Indian doctors who would come in for tours because he looked like them. Like, this is literally his words, not mine. And the whole point is, they would have a relationship. They could connect in a way that, awkward white guy from South Carolina couldn't, because they had a shared experience. And so, if you're running a medical device company or trying to get into the minds of the people that are making decisions around your technology's use, you darn well should try to get as close to understanding assuming you're a guy, how are women making these decisions? What's important to them? How's it working? Because it has a direct translation to the customers of your products. So anyway, that's my plug, if that makes sense.
Well, one of the things I think that you brought up, Scott, is the fact that we were trying to get suppliers to be more in touch with the real world and what was happening. And so that they would be listening more to customers, potential customers, about needs, gaps that they had to plug, all of those sorts of things, which lead us sort of to Skender and the clinician exchange in that sort of realm, because the voice of customer became, the one of the biggest buzzwords, as well as, surveys, human factors engineering. We really tried to emphasize you have to figure out what the needs are out there, just not what your company happens to be working on because you think it might make a lot of money. It all goes hand in hand. And I think we did a good job of picking through those sorts of things to highlight.
Yeah. There's a huge element to me in the paradigm shift of in prior years. I think there was if we build it, they will come. Like I'll build a thing and I'll find an audience for the thing. And really who seems to be making the most headway in this post-COVID world are those who are really doing that due diligence up front. That's, in the work that Skender and I and Barbara have done with some of the, is there value here? Is like, what is this going to look like in our go-to-market? With the people who are concept first, and then they're like, this is definitely something that other people care about. I think one of the favorite parts of the market research that we do is the number of times that we get told, like, who cares about that? Well, I'm definitely not going to, I may care about that a little bit, but not at the price point that you're talking about. And that's the magic of where we are right now, is the ability to access information, the ability for people to participate in focus groups, to send out surveys, to get that market research. We've never lived in a time where people are more excited to share their opinions about things. And so being able to really build up that huge cadre of knowledge of what steps make the most sense for me. It's like Indiana Jones and the Lost Ark. I think it's that one where they're having the spell. He's like walking on the steps, and if you don't spell Jehovah right, you're going to fall to your doom. And to me, it's one of them, Indiana Jones into something or other. And that is where, to me, it's like, you know what steps you need to make. You don't have to stumble anymore. And it's so interesting to me that there are still organizations who are stuck in that mindset of, well, I'm just going to, it's got my name on it. Of course, people will come here. And that's not the world we're living in today.
Well, I think as we look back across 100 episodes, I think the key thing that we have to realize is, it's the old adage of the only constant is change.
Yes.
And people in the tech world, they have already subscribed to the concept of Moore's law, where change is happening at a much more rapid pace and doubling, et cetera. However, in our industry, change was scary. Change was slow, and rightfully so, right? There is so much more at stake in our industry than there is in so many others, right? If Google gets a search wrong, okay, you may end up taking the wrong directions to someplace. But at the end of the day, and if we get something wrong, there could be a mortality at the end of that. So there are much higher stakes to this, and that's why change is so slow. But I think what we've learned over these 100 episodes, and the analogy to that time period of 4 years, is we can change. Change is necessary. Change is good. Change change is adaptation, and adaptation is success for the future. And I think that's one of those things where sometimes it takes a cataclysmic event to kind of shed. And believe me, I'm not, one thing I just want to make clear for everybody is I was personally impacted by COVID. I had some family that was lost. So I don't ever want it to be seen that we're talking only from a commercial perspective. And we recognize there was a lot of people who had challenges throughout COVID and innumerable and massively impactful in so many which ways. So I don't want that to be thought of that we are not heeding that side of it. But what we were stating here is to look at things from a perspective of understanding that change can happen and change can be good. And if we all put our minds to it, we can create change for the better. That's what I think these 100 episodes really mark. And I think that's our future. Scott, you want to add on to that?
Yeah, I think I do want to add on to that. I think what we've seen, and this may or may not be well received by the audience, but I think what has happened since we started our first episode is we're having to operate more like other industries. In that, if we think about what it was, right, when we were coming up in, you name it, med device company, it was all about Dr. Smith had a great relationship with Randy the rep, right? And as a result, that's how we grew the business. And that's not how business really happens nowadays in other industries. Like you don't go to telecom or some other thing, the oil and gas industry, and that maybe oil and gas is a different story, but you get the point. So what I'm hearing described and what I think about like the big themes that that we've focused on over this past 100 years is really two things. I think number one is I think we've had good reminders or been able to share good reminders of the timeless truths of business, right? How understand what your customers' needs are. So, be a resource. Focus on client or customer satisfaction, have clear value propositions, right? Be ready to address the various decision makers in an organization. Like those are things that we've talked about time and time again. And I think that's been one of the big themes that we've had. The other thing is, I think we've done a really good job of focusing on how the tactical execution of the timeless truths occur, right? So if we rewind 4 years ago, right, Barbara, you had great experience with a value analysis committee, and right, having done that for so many years. And the reality is, a lot of people didn't even know what a VAC pack was, right? Like, if we think about on the marketing side, like this was when we started doing this, people were like, "You're crazy. This is makes no sense." When you think about inside sales, again, we've seen this dramatic change. When we think about sort of the fractionalization of the implementation piece and all the things that the clinician exchange does, like all these things were new and novel concepts. They weren't different in that this is a brand new way of business. It was more about the tactical execution of the things that we know matter, which is understand your customer, serve their needs, and be a good resource. So anyway, I say all that because I think it's kind of fun to take a step back, from what we've talked about over so long and think through like, what are the key things that people can take away and then go back and listen to episodes about, this piece or that. But anyway, that was something I thought was worth sharing.
Look, and I love what you said, and also along the theme of, change ultimately is healthy, it's good and necessary, it's evolution, right? And so we all had to evolve into something that required different skills and different capabilities. And, the companies and the people that grew and embraced the change are loving it right now. I mean, how awesome is it? I mean, I am sitting at home right now. I've had some of the highest level meetings that I've ever had in my life today, sitting at my kitchen table, literally working and doing my thing. And then as soon as this podcast is over, I'm going to shut my computer off and I'm ready for the weekend. There's no 1 hour commute and dealing with traffic and all this other stuff. So I think for a lot of us that, in the beginning going virtual was, how am I going to function at home? And, am I going to be impactful? What we're seeing is productivity is through the roof. As long as you're managing it properly and you have the remote management tools in place and you're coaching just like you would in a physical environment, we're seeing productivity skyrocket and people just enjoying their jobs even more than ever before.
As we've been focusing, a lot of what we're talking about is really the 100 episodes that got us to here. But we all know this is not the end of our road. So we've got more episodes coming up. So what are some of the insights or trends that you guys are seeing for the direction that we're moving in? Like what are some of our next episodes going to be about? What do people have to look forward to?
That's a really interesting question because there are themes that have not been accomplished during the whole time that we've been doing the podcast that still exists, rural healthcare and all the issues around that. So we need to follow those things because what I'm hearing various different suppliers when I'm going to meetings now is I think our company should be doing something for rural healthcare in certain areas. And they're thinking about it in a very creative but caring way versus, ooh, there's a market I could get in there and sell something. It's more of maybe we can help them get over some humps and things. So I think that's something we need to keep track of. This whole waste in healthcare has not gone away. And we have to be really careful because we're talking, sort of tongue in cheek, but probably not only if Mike gets off the call and he enjoys the weekend, we probably will have learned that 3 important things happen to the whole country that's going to, sway the balances of tariffs or whatever. So that whole money discussion is still really viable out there. But I've said this a lot in different broadcasts, whether it's on Women in Medtech or a Value Analysis Experts, or this one is you have to control what you own and tighten up what you can, fix what you can within your own organizations. And I think we're going to be looking at who's doing a good job of that and how do we bring that to the fore so that suppliers understand where potential customers are kind of going these days and how to stay focused appropriately in their market and in their market size.
I got a couple things. One, I think we're going to be talking about government's impact on our industry. And that's importantly defined, whether it's tariffs, whether it's the cuts to NIH funding, right? This is the next politics aside, right? The next 4 years are going to be bananas in terms of the impact of change that we're going to see in our industry. So I think, to me, that's one of the biggest areas that we're going to focus in on over the next 4 years. The next thing that I think about are going to be data's impact on our industry. And by that, what I mean is, everybody's talking about AI and it's so overused right now, but it is going to have an impact. And, one of the things, I ran a project or tried to start a project back when I was running innovation at a large organization that I was a part of, that got completely shut down because I thought it would be really cool for us to do a head-to-head study against our biggest competitor for one of our flagship products. Because I believed, hey, based on the data that I'm seeing, I think we're better at procedural times and outcomes and things like that. And that was shot down, and I was mocked mercilessly because they're like, there's no way we're going to do a head-to-head study to figure out which actually gives better outcomes. Because what happens if we're wrong? Right? And it's a good question, right? You run a business, it's a great question. The person who said that is a very smart leader. But the truth of the matter is, as we think about what health systems can do now, they can start to do comparative analyses inside their health system on, we use product A versus product B, which gave us better outcomes. And so, and that, by the way, is something that supply chain folks have wanted for some time, value analysis professionals have wanted for some time. And so imagine now imagine that's in place for your space. What are you going to do about it? So I think data and AI's and analytical capabilities at the very least will have tremendous impacts on our industry. The other 2 things that I have, and these are much more specific to like, hey, what's marketing's job? Because I feel like us marketing guys have been from the back room now, like we're in much more significant conversations from a marketing from a business operations standpoint. The 2 things that I'm seeing is, one, like there's a significant impact and shift in how marketing, and we'll just say non-sales rep led communications with clients or customers, is changing, right? The voice that comes from marketing, whether digital, conferences, in person, whatever the case might be, is growing exponentially. And I think that's a trend that we're going to be talking about, if not because I'm driving it. But anyway, and then the final thing is just tactical execution on things like getting deep in accounts. One of the things that we've seen across our clients is the number of logos that companies are getting is going up. The depth at which they can get penetration seems to be going down. And so I think that there's some interesting things about like, how are health systems making decisions? How does that impact you as a company? Where are you allocating resources? Is it better to be rich than famous? Like there's a lot of things that are playing out in that space. So anyway, I think, Colleen, those are things we'll be talking about.
I also think the impact of private equity is going to have a massive impact that's being felt, and has been over the last 5-10 years. But as dollars, the investment community is always moving in some way, shape, or form, and as they tackle the provider side of our business with much greater veracity, it's going to impact every aspect. You want to talk about data? That is how they're going to make every decision. And for good, bad, there's going to be some challenges to that, right? But they are going to make everything and we're going to see closures of businesses. We're going to see decisions made contrary to what might be best for the public good in any capacity, et cetera. And I think that's going to have a resonating impact to the same extreme as the government impact that we talked about before. I think that's going to be a thing that I don't know if we as an industry are truly prepared for that. I mean, if you just look at the acute care mix, I think it's still 85% are nonprofit to this day. Maybe it's a little bit more. But that number is going in the other direction. There is more private taking place in that. And it's no surprise that the number of institutions, which were roughly 6,500 plus just 15, 20 years ago, is now down to about 5,200 institutions, acute care with a label of acute care. And I wouldn't be surprised if we start seeing that number dip into the fours in the veritably near future, which again, Barbara, you were talking about, rural health is unfortunately going to have a very challenging time in the crosshairs of a private equity-led industry.
Yeah.
So I think this is all incredibly fascinating. There is a lot more, and there's things that, AI, frankly, is going to change the entire story in so many capacities. The disruption to labor, disruption to patient throughput, and I say disruption, there could be benefits, et cetera. So I'm using disruption only as a placeholder here because it could be good, bad, it could be other things. But I think, some of the things that we're going to be talking about 6 months from now may not even be on any of our radars. That's how fast the change is happening in an industry that was so beset on no change. And I think that's really interesting. So I think as we start thinking about the next 100 episodes and where we're going to be going, first of all, I'm probably going to seek to replace each of you with AI avatars. So
you'd lose Scott's mom's listenership, and that's really
exactly.
We'd have no listeners then.
I think she may not be able to tell, right? Every once in a while he throws in a quip about South Carolina football or something, Georgia, right? Says something in there and then she won't know the difference.
She would know. Thanks, Mom. Thanks for keeping me on the show. I just appreciate it.
So with that, I want to first off thank the audience, and I want to thank the panel, and I'll come back to that in a second. But thank you to the panel for your dedication and all that you do. And before I give my final thoughts, I'll give each of you a chance to give your final thoughts on the past 100 and the next 100. So, Colleen, why don't you start us off?
I really have been incredibly proud of the work that we've done here. Really being able to reach people in a moment where there was a lot of uncertainty, which is where we started, to the actionable insights that we still share now, to the feature highlights where we tell the stories of the people and what are happening. I'm so excited about, where we as an industry are going and being able to really help guide the change that is going to happen. And, to Skender's point of things are happening so very quickly, I think, now more than ever, and a podcast like ours, where we're really highlighting the who, what, where, when, why, and how to meet those needs is, more exciting than ever to be part of that. And, really excited to have moved from the producing booth, up to the front and to be able to participate and feature some of these great stories that we talk about.
Great. Thank you, Colleen. Scott?
Yeah, I think, where were we 100 episodes ago? And we were all stuck in our houses and, wondering if that was ever going to change. Where are we today? Like some of us, like me, are still stuck in our house, still a hermit. But I think it's been neat being able to call out what we're seeing individually and as a group as this industry undergoes a massive change. And so that's been really fun to be a part of that. I'm excited about the next 100 episodes. I think we had one sort of, one seminal event with, COVID and the shutdown and that sort of thing that I think kicked a lot of this stuff off. But the truth of the matter is kind of what I was saying earlier, like we have every bit as much turmoil today as we did back in 2020 and 2021. And so, I'm excited about all of us talking through what we're seeing over the course of the next, 4 years as we see how things are going to change. Because at the end of the day, to the point that you made, Mike, earlier, is the only constant is change. And so that's going to be fun to see and again, rewind 100 episodes from now in terms of where we are today. So yeah, that's my thing.
Barbara?
So I'm in the sort of, we try to bring what's happening in the real world from so many different points of view and perspectives. And I can physically see that we've all changed and been flexible and adapted during all this. We don't just stick to our guns and say something that we might have thought of, 5 years ago. No, it's the way we have to do business or whatever. I think we're out there. We have our ear to the ground. We're paying attention. We keep up to date. And I just think that as long as we keep it in the real world and try to bring other people into that real world, and how can we help influence how they deal with it? It's exciting.
Yeah. Mike?
So from a sales perspective, so where we are today is, all right, everybody now is using some sort of inside sales, virtual sales force, and most of them are, quite frankly, terrible. Most people are, they've done is taken their outside salespeople and they put them on virtual technology, thinking that it's the same medium, and it's not. Virtual medium is a brief and brilliant medium. There is no chance to build this extensive rapport that typically you'll do as an outside rep, or take them to lunch or a golf course or whatever your magic was. It's a different game. And so what you're seeing now is the market's being flooded every day with horrible sales calls that are just bothering decision makers, right? So now what's going to happen? The same thing that happened in the residential marketplace, right? Remember when you used to have a telephone, a home phone, and remember when the phone would ring off the hook with people trying to sell you stuff, and then the market got pissed off and said, we don't want this anymore. So what'd they do? They put in a do not call list. All right. So what's going to happen? Eventually, these hospitals and these decision makers are going to get real tired of these phone calls. And so what are they going to do? They're going to put a do not call list together. And so now my business, by the way, is all making these virtual calls. And I'm the one that's predicting the downfall of the industry because I see it. And so what's the opportunity here? The opportunity is to make sure you get a relationship. And the same thing that's always existed in sales is you get a relationship so you're on the approved call list, because they all know that they need information, they need exposure to the latest technology. And so if you're on that list of you bring value, as opposed to you're just making sales calls to make your quota or whatever, you're going to be rewarded when the whole thing flips into a restriction, because you've made a difference in educating and being a resource for people. Lastly, what you're going to see by our 100th episode, I believe, is AI legitimately making at least 50% of the sales calls. I think you'll see AI. I'm already starting. We're starting it at Emerge using a virtual platform right now to do early stage work. We're launching our first pilots right now as we speak, and we'll see how it goes. And so eventually the tech is good enough right now to where we believe, we want to pilot it. I'll let you know throughout the next season how it goes. But there's no doubt that AI, your point, Skender, about the avatar, it's here. It's coming. It's just a matter of time before the cost benefits get in there. And just the funny piece to that is my AI will meet with your AI and see if there's compatibility. And if there is, they'll set up a meeting for us. And this won't only happen in the business world. The woman who was the CEO of Bumble, which is the online platform for dating, said your AI is going to be meeting with my AI, and they're going to see if they hit it off, and they'll recommend if we date. So wrap your brain around that, and we'll be dealing with that over the next 100 episodes.
As long as nobody starts naming their AI tool Skynet,
it's already happened. It's already happened.
Yeah, it's already there. It's already well. Mike, thanks for scaring the shit out of all of us. Appreciate that. So my last thought is I just want to thank the audience for giving us time. One of the things that we track when you're in podcasting is you track how much of the audience, not just the number of people that joined, but how glued are people to the episode. And one of the things that we're most proud of is in almost every episode that we do, we have a very high rate of people staying on through the end. And that is a testament to this panel, that is a testament to the topics, that is a testament to the audience who is eager to learn and find ways to see. So as we think about turning the page to the next 100 episodes, etc., we encourage you to come on. We are talking about things that are relevant. Each and every one of us is talking to, today I've had conversations with no less than 7 different companies today in different phases of their business maturity, in different aspects of the industry. From that, what I can tell you is on an aggregated basis, I can give you some idea as to what is going on in the industry. That's why I turn to us for that insight. Come to this podcast. Get that insight. If you're feeling on an island, if you're only seeing that tree, this podcast is your opportunity to see what everybody else is doing. That's what we really wanted to bring to the world. And we've done that through 100 episodes. And I think it's going to be really important, in episode number 200 for that to continue to happen. And I really encourage everybody, keep coming, keep staying on, give us feedback. Let us know what else you want to hear about. We'll have our AI agent talk to your AI agent, and see what we can set up from there. But thank you to the audience. Thank you to the panel. Really looking forward to the next 100 episodes, and wishing everybody well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Go.
Thank you.